Welcome back after a long hiatus, a bit of a hiatus, few week hiatus, to the Bayside SF Giants talk show. I'm Marc Delucchi. He's Kerry Crowley. We both had some chaos in things, but Kerry. I'm glad to be back talking Giants baseball with you.
Yeah, it's been an interesting few weeks since the last time we talked. Giants appear to be headed in the right direction. They all of a sudden were back at or within a half game or so of a wild card spot, and then all of a sudden, over the last week, you lose a series to the Angels, you lose a series to the Cubs, you get swept in St. Louis by the Cardinals. Just an utterly disastrous week on the field for this franchise. They're now third from the bottom of the National League, and so they're in that talking point with the Rockies and the Marlins in a discussion that you never want to be in what's a jam-packed National League. But then again, Mark, one good week of baseball, and they'll probably be back in a wild card spot. So it's way too soon to write them off, even though it feels like that's what I should be doing right now.
Yeah, I know, and the timing is terrible for our podcast too, because we didn't even get to do the Elliot Ramos victory lap for ourselves as he's been playing
Exactly.
like a true all-star, even amidst this. But let's start in the sort of more broad place, and it's a thing that has I understand both sides of it, and at times it's frustrating to me, and at times it is an engaging thing to me, because what do we make of being within shooting distance of the third wild card? Like this has been kind of, I feel like, an eternal question for the Giants the last 2 years, because obviously they've lived in mediocrity. They've lived at the middle around 500. And like they are still only 3 games back, I believe, of the third wild card currently, right? Like this, despite being as low as they are in the standings. And I don't know, I guess I'll throw to you in the sense of, like, do you view, like, how do you internalize, like, yeah, you're still competitive for the third wild card amidst these other things? And again, I'm not really a proponent of selling in most contexts, and so we can have the sort of whether it's a seller's market, and the Giants should consider that if we want to. But I guess more of just like, yeah, how do you view competing for the third wild card? Because it is as easy if you're 3 games back of the third wild card now versus being 3 games back of the second wild card a few years ago, or 3 years back of the one wild card a few years ago, or 3 years back of the division before that. It is the same proximity to the playoffs. But when you're evaluating a team and team success, it does feel like it's murkier. And I don't know if we've adjusted how we view that. I don't know how to do it. So I'm throwing it to you to see
Yeah,
what you
I think that that's the critical point that I look at here is I don't think that we as baseball pundits or analysts or fans have adjusted properly to the third wild card era and how we view success and how we view failure and what teams should be doing to position themselves on an annual basis to make the playoffs and whether simply making the playoffs is good enough. Because I think that what's frustrating for me is the Arizona Diamondbacks kind of set a template for everyone last year and said, all you have to do is win 84 games. You're in. You can upset the Dodgers. You line up your pitching. All you got to do is have three pitchers who can win you a postseason game. And all of a sudden, you are good enough to get to and potentially win the World Series. When in reality, your odds of winning the World Series as an 84 win team are just simply so much worse than they would be if you had a 100-win talent and you
think.
were extremely competitive and winning series over the course of the regular season. And I just think it's insane to look at a team that's competing for the third wild card and for ownership or a front office or players to take a whole lot of pride in that. I don't think
Mhm.
that you can look at this jam-packed National League where mediocrity is pervasive, and in fact, it's encouraged by the fact that this third wild card is in existence, and say this is what we're striving for, playing meaningful baseball. Because you can't look at this version of the San Francisco Giants and say, I love what they're doing on the field. I really enjoy watching this team. This team is living up to and or meeting my expectations as a fan. It's just so far from reality right now that I think that we have got to somewhat change the way we talk about this third wild card chase and zoom out, think bigger picture, and say, are you as a fan satisfied with the performance of the organization right now? I think 90-95% of people would say no. And I think that that is, look, the Giants could very well end up as the third wildcard team this year with 83 or 84 wins. But again, I'm not going to be sitting here and patting them on the back for that. And if they get to the World Series, it's a different story. Again, you position yourself to win in October, but I just think it's crazy to look at the way that baseball is currently constructed and think that this is a good season because they're in contention for the third wild card. How do you look at this whole framing of the narrative right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, and I think part of the reason it's tough for me is I think for so long it's been fairly straightforward to evaluate an organization, to evaluate a president of baseball operations or a manager or whoever you viewed as the most important person, decision maker in an organization, based on like proximity to some basic goals, right? Like
Mhm.
for most, it was playoffs, making the playoffs consistently or proximity to the playoffs. And then if you were like a dynastic kind of team, then it was proximity to the World Series. And if you're falling short of
Yep.
that, then a change will likely be made, right? And I'm thinking about this in the way I'm evaluating Farhan Zaidi and Zaidi's tenure because, as with so many things, there is these pushes and pulls, right? Like, I think right now it's like the Giants should be going for that third wild card because you should always be trying to win. You should be trying to
Yes.
make the playoffs. I think this team is good enough to make the playoffs. And I will say, of the potential third wild card teams, I think a healthy Giants are a lot scarier than most of the other ones if you're talking about potential matchups with some of those top teams in the National League. But that does not mean the Giants are in a place they should be and in a place they feel good about as a franchise. And, again, we're talking about making the third wild card is not a success. But then we have to talk about, well, what does it then mean about Zaidi's tenure that the year they expanded the playoffs even further, they fall just short.
Mhm.
And in 2022 and 2023, they fall short of the third wild card too. Like, and I realize there may be some people who would put blame on to Gabe Kapler for that. But even if we want to say a manager's, 3 wins and losses, right? There's that he was, that there's that significant a difference. Okay, then if they were the third wild card, do we view that is that success? And again, as we get into so far into Zaidi's tenure at this point, again, it's tough. It's tough because even evaluating the season is like, okay, Patrick Bailey is looking to be a beast and looking to be a foundational piece, and Patrick Bailey is kind of, and Kyle Harrison, despite the ways he is not being elite, I am very pleased with what I've seen of Kyle Harrison. It's not carrying the Giants, but like these are Bailey and Harrison are the two pieces that it seems like Zaidi has a right to sort of build his case about what he's built organizationally. Hell, even Hunter Bishop's kind of having a bounce back year in terms of what he's
No.
doing at AAA. Um, and at the same time, a lot like I don't know where credit goes with Elliot Ramos because I feel like there are 29 teams in baseball who could have had Elliot Ramos for a very marginal prospect piece this offseason and just didn't make the call. And maybe I'm incorrect on that. I don't, maybe the Giants behind closed doors did have a different evaluation than they were signaling publicly. But it sure seems like the way they handled him in spring training, the way they handled him early in the season. Again, I've said this consistently for months, is that did the Giants cost themselves the playoffs last year because they didn't give Elliot Ramos a shot last August? And again, the start of this season, what the start looks like if they give Ramos a bigger shot in spring training to make the opening day roster. And so, yeah, it's really tough because I don't think the Giants should sell. I don't think the Giants should stop going for it. And I think they still have the pieces to make a run. Again, to me, the whole story of the season is tread water until you hope either some combination of the younger pitchers adjust or you get a Cobb, a Robbie Ray back. And in this case, a Blake Snell, who's been historically a slow starter. And obviously this has been a really abysmal first few months for him. And yeah, I could see the Giants going on a really impressive second half run and being a team you're excited about heading into the postseason. We're excited about the team going forward. But again, if it ends up being they have a solid but not good, like a good, not great second half, they do make the third wild card. Maybe they win a couple games, but get eliminated in the first round. It's like, yeah, like I guess that's a step in the right direction. But gosh, it still feels like how many it just 3 years of that in a league as baseball moves towards a basketball playoffs model, we have to view the playoffs in the way a basketball fan base views playoffs, like being a 6 seed or a 7 seed or an 8 seed is not going to get people to be excited about the team, right? Like, you need to take those next steps to build that. And again, like I said, I thought the Giants did good this offseason. Obviously, there's been some bad injury luck. But again, like the Elliot Ramos development is a pretty damn stroke of great luck. And so I'm kind of even hesitant to give them the injury out because, well, you just kind of stumbled into this all-star outfielder.
Yeah, I think I look at development and progress as an organization through three lenses and three objectives, three goals, however you want to phrase it. One is winning, and that's simply, wins and losses at the end of a 162 game season. Did you win 95 games? Did you win 83 games? Did you win 73 games? And that's the first way to evaluate progress. The second way, I think, is did you develop the prospects in your minor league system? Did you develop core pieces for your future? I think the Giants are doing a better job this season of saying that they've answered that question with a yes than they are in terms of wins and losses. So they're
Yeah.
what, 6 games under 500 at the time that
Mhm.
we're having this conversation. So winning is something that they're not doing well. And that is the most important thing. Are they developing meaningful pieces for the future? Are they developing their talent? I think Patrick Bailey is a key part of this future. Elliot Ramos certainly looks like he's a big part of this future. Kyle Harrison, like you
Yeah.
mentioned, I'm really impressed by his results. And I think that he will adapt and evolve at the major league level into the potential number two, number three starter that I really think that he could be over the course of his career. There are other success stories within the system, although you look at the lower level of the minors and they're fairly limited, especially on the hitting side right now. I think, you can take some comfort in Bryce Eldridge
Yep.
and what he's doing at low A San Jose, but there aren't that many players at high A Eugene or double A Richmond where you're
Yeah.
succeeding. Now,
I had a lot of optimism coming off of last year's draft class, and a lot of the other than Eldridge, really, a lot of those players have had really rough first full seasons for sure.
yeah, absolutely. So you've got those two things that really define success for a franchise. One, the Giants are not winning, but two, they're developing okay, maybe better than I would have anticipated. Now, number three is, are you achieving your goal of playing an exciting, fun, competitive brand of baseball that your fans enjoy? And the answer is an emphatic no to that. And Giants fans hated the team under Gabe Kapler.
Yeah.
Giants fans, for whatever reason, whether it was platoons, whether it was the way that the Giants managed their pitching
There's just
staff,
vibes.
exactly. Whether it was simply vibes, they just hated Gabe Kapler
Yeah.
as the manager. And that, there's corners of the internet where people love Gabe Kapler. There's corners of the internet where people hate Gabe Kapler. But I would say an overwhelming majority of casual Giants fans
Yes.
did not like
Yeah,
Gabe
or
Kapler.
I think, or in it, maybe even worse, it wasn't even did not like it was they just were disengaged with him. Like they
Exactly.
just like
Yes.
it was like I think that's the thing is on the internet there were the two very strong camps. There are people who very adamantly hated Kapler. There are people who very adamantly love Kapler. But that's the like Twitter pockets. As I like again being in the city when you interact with folks who were casual fans who went to like games from the Bochy era, who were fans and even the Felipe Alou era and stuff. You would talk to them and they were just very disengaged with the team. And I think and with Kapler in general, just like, yeah, he does it. I'm just not interested.
Exactly. So you go back to November when Farhan Zitos makes his comments at the general managers meeting about kind of the identity that he wants to create for the San Francisco Giants in 2024 and beyond. And he talked about getting younger. He talked about getting more athletic. He talked about playing better defense. And you look at this 2024 squad almost halfway through the season, and it's just none of that. Like their identity is so similar to what they were
Mm.
last year, which is an old, slow, boring team that's far too reliant on veteran players, that doesn't have a pitching staff that can get you through a regular season. They're going bullpen game after bullpen game. They've got guys on the major league roster who really are just weighing the team down right now in a way that's like, I don't even know if it's fair to them because the front office didn't provide this roster with enough depth headed
Right.
into the regular season. Like people want to say that, oh, Keaton Wynn should, be demoted from the rotation and the Giants have to find better options and the injury bug has bit them to the point where they had to start Keaton Wynn. The reality is in spring training, there was no question that Keaton Wynn was in the rotation. Like
Yeah.
Keaton Wynn wasn't just the number 5 starter. He was the number 3 or the number
Yeah.
4 for the San Francisco Giants at that point. And so I just look at the way they approached this season, the goals that they had for what they wanted their identity to be,
Mm-hmm.
and they're so far away from that that I think it just takes away from the progress that you may be seeing in terms of developing core players for the future. It makes me question like where this organization is headed from a big picture long-term perspective.
Yeah. I mean, we've been following this team closely and I just always feel perplexed because I feel like there are a lot of things I really like about how things are looking when we're talking about like pitching staff or other things, but it just, yeah, it's never clicked, right? Like or I should say it clicked in 21, right? And, although again, I would much put that on Crawford, Posey, and Belt and what their career years were that season. But nevertheless, since it just hasn't clicked, and you know the it, it's tough because I agree with you. At the same time, I also think, you know, I don't know what more Zaidi realistically could have done just in this offseason. Like, I think, again, I think the problems with the 2024 team are a result of years of Zaidi missing opportunities and misjudging and misprioritizing and misevaluating some things, right? Like, again, Mauricio Dubon would be their everyday shortstop, right? Like, and he would have been for probably the past 2.5 seasons if the Giants had just kept him around, right? It would be a Dubon and Estrada up the middle. And like, again, not that Dubon would be an all-star, but God, compared to the shortstop production offensively, compared to the defensive mishaps that have happened, like given what he's done, like that'd be pretty damn valuable for them. At the same time, it's like, look, Ramos's emergence is a source of excitement. He is bringing some athleticism. He is bringing some fun. Like Jung-Hoo Lee, I think was bringing that before obviously he gets hit with the injury. Again, I was never a big Matt Chapman person, but Matt Chapman was supposed to bring some of that. And, again, he's been disappointing, right? Like, I think there's the problem was, and this is where the conversation does sort of become, is the 2023-24 offseason was that it was unlike anything we'd seen under Zaidi up to this point, and with many off seasons of precedent, both in how aggressive they were, the length of contracts they were willing to give out, the whole way through. Even if we take the Snell and Chapman contracts out of it, even before them, right, with just like Soler
Yeah.
and Lee and Robbie Ray, right,
And Jordan Hicks as well. I
and
mean,
Jordan Hicks, right,
4 years of
and
a gamble, which has paid off
yeah,
largely.
and the question is, was that shift a ownership told Zaidi to do things differently, or was that a ownership finally allowing Zaidi to do things in the way he wanted to, but had been told or restricted he couldn't in previous off seasons, right? And again, that's the thing. I don't know from the inside, or I don't know the inside on that, and I don't, because that's what matters to me.
Yeah.
Because I think the reason this team is boring to me is because of, again, the post 2021 offseason is the biggest missed opportunity the Giants franchise has had, right? Both from letting Kevin Gossman walk is sort of, I think culturally was just a bad precedent to set, but obviously on the field, what he would have meant the past 2 years. And on top of it, again, you have Marcus Semien, you have Corey Seager, you have all these pieces. The Giants at that time were the belle of the ball in terms of coming off the 107-win season. They'd just done all this stuff. Buster Posey was retiring. You knew there was a void you had to fill. It was very unfair to basically say Joey Bart is going to replace Buster Posey, and we're making no upgrades to offset that. So we're essentially saying Joey Bart will be Buster Posey, right?
Mhm.
And I just don't think they were able to cover that. Again, you think about what if they landed one of those shortstops who's been elite, pretty much everyone but Trevor Story in that class on that shortstop side has been fairly good and productive. That probably is the difference between them missing the playoffs in 2022 and 2023, right? Like,
Yeah.
again, if they signed Carlos Correa not with the physical stuff the year prior, when he basically takes a pillow deal with the Twins in the first place, right? And so, yeah, I don't disagree with you. And I don't know, the answer in baseball is superstars, right? And the
Yeah.
Giants still, Patrick Bailey and Elliott Rock, the optimistic side is like, they have one in Logan Webb. They've had one in Logan Webb. And Patrick Bailey and Elliott Ramos are starting to look like it. And it's the first time I think we're seeing two under 30 Giants who you can say are in that conversation in a very long time. And that is a pretty big reason for optimism. It's just, again, there's all these other pieces that have to fall into place. And again, I understand the fan base being tired of waiting, right? And wanting to see dividends here, right? Like, I think the first 5 years of Zaidi's tenure have been disappointing and did not yield the results that he expected and frankly, that should have been expected of him. But I do think things are getting better, but again, I feel like I've been saying this for 3 years, so I don't know.
I don't think things are getting better at a rate that's good enough in a 30-team league where
Ooh,
you now
yes.
have the expanded playoffs. Like, I
Yeah.
think you could say they are making progress if it was still, 3 division winners and 1 wild card from each league. And you could
Mhm.
say, okay, baseball's just really hard to get into the postseason. The Giants are setting
Yeah.
themselves up for success. You've got these building blocks, but there's no excuse for a team with the payroll that the Giants have to not be in it on an annual basis. And the thing that flummoxes me, going back to the 2021 discussion that you just brought up, is this is an organization that before the playoffs really expanded to the point that we're at right now, 2017, they lose 98 games and they went all in. They didn't go over the luxury tax, but they went up to about 50 cents
Yeah.
under the luxury
Yeah.
tax, which is why you saw them acquire Evan Longoria and Andrew
Right.
McCutcheon. It wasn't because those were the specific players they wanted. It
They
was
had to
because
stay under the luxury tax. Yep.
to stay under the luxury
Yep.
tax. That is exactly why they did that. It wasn't like, oh, there was some analytical model spitting out, hey, we still think there's four good years left of Evan
Yes.
Longoria. No, they thought that there was one good year left of Evan Longoria, and competing in 2018 was all that mattered
Yeah.
after 2019.
Yeah.
And I actually kind of like that approach,
Yeah.
even though it was terrible for the organization to kind of lead
Well,
all
okay,
of it.
okay, McCutcheon. Look, but here's the thing, right? The what was terrible was they traded Brian Reynolds, right? Like
Yes.
there was, and again, that's where it comes down to your internal evaluations and that process. The Evan Longoria trade, I will stand by. At worst, is a net neutral for the Giants. They gave up no
totally
piece
agree with
who
that.
became impactful. Longoria never really had a great year with the Giants, but I think it was all around solid. And
No
like
third
you
baseman in the
mentioned,
system.
yeah, and like you mentioned, the Giants luxury tax number did not change in that trade because people forget they sent off Denard Span's offsetting salary to basically equalize it, right? Like the Shohei Ohtani and Giancarlo Stanton week where the Giants were finalists for Ohtani and they had the agreement for Stanton. The question was whether they could convince him. That is such obviously a pivotal moment for many reasons, but like I always think about that as like this what could have been, because if Stanton is going to go to the Giants, that was Jeff Samardzija coming off his best year with the Giants, and the Giants were going to trade him to offset his salary for luxury tax reasons if they'd gotten Stanton. Anyway, alternate worlds.
The other thing I just think is like to build off that 2017, 98 losses, they go all in up to a reasonable amount. 2021, they don't put anything in. It's like they refuse
and they
to
have Buster Posey's 20 million coming off the books. They have Kevin Gossman's 20 million coming off the books, and they basically just have an equal payroll the next year that had been, yeah.
It's one of the worst decisions, and I do that had to be ownership. Like
Yes.
you can't sit here and tell me that Farhan Zitos didn't want to spend.
That was scared money after the pandemic, decreasing revenues, and preemptive panic about their Mission Rock real estate project that had all this commercial and apartment real estate that they were worried about the commercial market and all these markets crashing, and they had just put all this money in. I 100% agree with you. That was scared money from ownership. And, those are the consequences of it. And again, we'll see how it plays out. Again, I've been saying this the whole time, the all season, and it is true, is like, look, Blake Snell is still around. He's still rehabbing. He still seems to be trending toward a direction to join the rotation in a couple weeks. The way Jordan Hicks is pitching, like Robbie Ray's, I will say, to me, seems ahead. I am more optimistic about Robbie Ray now than I thought I was going to be. I really was expecting.
I'm more optimistic about Robbie Ray than anyone not named Kyle Harrison and Logan Webb in this Giants rotation. I mean, Robbie Ray is going to deliver for this team.
Yeah, but the fact is, like, there's literally 2 Cy Young winners who haven't done anything for the Giants and aren't 40 years old. And there's Logan Webb, who, if I had said there were 3 Cy Young winners, no one would really bat an eye at it. So the fact that you still have that, the fact that the bullpen, Camilo Doval has obviously been the most inconsistent piece of that back of the bullpen, given how Ryan Walker and Tyler Rogers have looked. Again, pitching staffs can get hot, and man, if you get a dominant couple weeks out of a pitching staff, things can change quickly. And so, again, the Giants, the question is, can they keep treading water, right? They're down to 6 games below 500. They need a couple of weeks just to hold out if they're going to kind of stay in this mess, especially the next month as you get closer to the trade deadline. But to wrap, Kerry, I want to shift us because we didn't get to talk about Willie Mays. We didn't get to talk about the game at Rickwood because of the break we took. And, I just wanted to take a minute, to talk about, the passing of Willie Mays with you and think about like what your, I don't know if takeaways is even the right word, but what you felt and were thinking about, like when that news breaks, obviously when it did.
Yeah, I'll start with this. I think that, I've been a host at KMBR for 8 years now, and it's so cool to be able to do sports radio in your hometown, talking about the teams that you grow up in, especially a call-in show where you get to talk to different callers. I think that's just like a great privilege. I have never felt as honored to do radio as I did after Willie Mays' death because of the connection that he made with generations of Giants fans. He is someone who in 1950, 1960, 1970 was so good and so consistent that in all of those decades, he came up in 51 and retires in 73 with the Mets. He in an era where you don't have Sports Center showing you every play every night, where you don't have a stats your first click at any moment, where you're only getting things basically from going out to the ballpark and then maybe reading about it in the local newspaper. You have to be so consistently good to break through in the way that Willie Mays did, and the way that people want to tell stories about Willie Mays to their children, to their grandchildren. It just says to me, like, the profound cultural impact that he made goes well beyond baseball. It's an
Mhm.
impact on American society, and I consider myself extremely fortunate to have grown up in San Francisco and in the Bay Area specifically, because I was privy to these stories about Willie Mays. Because it wasn't just my parents; it was everyone who wanted to talk about Willie Mays. They hear that you're interested in baseball as a 6-year-old. They're like, "You think Barry Bonds is good? You have no idea what I got to see
Yep.
when I was a kid." And I just think, like, the opportunity to connect with people who saw Willie play last week, it's why I love doing this. It's why I love talking about sports, and I just, like, I can't quit it no matter
Yeah.
how much I want to step away from sports and, like, want to have maybe more meaningful conversations in my life. You have to realize, like, Mays is a meaningful conversation, and, like, the things that he did just go so beyond the scope of what I'll ever know. It's amazing to me. What about you?
Yeah, no, I mean, I thought, immediately about like my own fandom in that history. I didn't grow up in the Bay Area, but my father did, and I basically inherited my Bay Area sports fandom from him because of that. And he was a baby boomer. His first favorite player was Willie Mays, and how that shaped the course of his life, and in doing so shaped the course of mine. Again, like you talk about the stories you hear about him, but also I feel like, we are like you said, we're both of the age. We never got to see Willie Mays play, obviously, but like his shadow was there. And like I feel like, I don't know about you, but like for me, it's like reading Willie Mays biographies are like the earliest. It feels like an early indoctrination that that I
Yeah.
got, and things, and the incredible stories, and obviously the valuable history that comes with that, and the things I learned, in the way that informed, I think about for myself, I think about for my father, the ways that our own views of the world, like, as white dudes, like, were positively informed by by reading about Willie Mays, by wanting to know about his life. I think about what eventually, obviously the Rickwood game that sort of became this um beautiful memorial to Mays in a lot of ways. And obviously Reggie Jackson having his viral moment talking about what he had to go through when he was playing in Alabama, decades ago, and all of that. So no, I think about, a lot, both just like the ways in which like sports do have these long-standing dominoes that in no way you can fully connect, but are there, and yeah, to end on, I think, a piece of Mays's greatness. People forget he lost a year and a half of his prime to military service. He had 660 home runs. He was one of just two players to ever hit 50 home runs in a season that were playing their home games at the Polo Grounds, which obviously was like 450 plus to center field. Johnny Mize was the only other one. And he was the only player to ever hit 50 home runs in a season playing home games at Candlestick Park. And he did that as a right-handed hitter in a park that had much nastier winds for right-handed hitters. Willie McCovey couldn't do it, even though it was a little easier. Barry Bonds couldn't do it. Willie
Yeah.
Mays is the only one to do it at Candlestick. And, the anyway, I think that's the thing to me that I come back to, is when we talk about what Bonds could have done in Yankee Stadium and all these things, playing, and obviously after he came to the Giants and Candlestick and then Oracle, and Mays feels like that to perhaps an even more extreme degree.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. Like, every day since Willie's passing, I've learned of a new stat that puts his career in context. I've learned of a new number that makes you just, like, think, wow,
Yeah.
this is what he accomplished. And he did it at a time where, like I said, no social media,
No.
you don't have cable TV, fans are watching on TV once a week by the middle of his career, and everyone wants to tell you about the time that they saw Willie Mays. That
Yep.
says it all for me.
Yep. 50 home runs at 24, 50 home runs at 34. Elliot Ramos is trying to match that and get that started this year. And on that note, I think
Julio
that'll be
Ramos, Luis Garcia comparisons too, by
that's
the way.
they're looking pretty good right now. But That's Kerry Crowley. I'm Marc Delucchi. Thanks for tuning in this week. We will be back next week. We'll just call it. We had our early summer vacation. And yeah, thank you all for listening. Give us a follow and subscribe over on YouTube for Bayside Baseball, and we'll have more Giant stuff coming shortly. Thanks again for listening. See ya.